In May of 1968, the United States Navy submarine USS Scorpion mysteriously disappeared following the conclusion of a tour of duty in the Mediterranean Sea, shadowing the Soviet Navy. When the Scorpion failed to report in, the U.S. Navy began a search for the missing submarine. The Scorpion was later to be found at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, nearly 2 miles down and 400 miles southwest of the Azores. The submarine was in several pieces, and all 99 crew members on board had perished. It was the second loss of an American submarine in under a decade. The loss of the USS Scorpion and her crew has never been fully explained, and everything from a faulty torpedo, mechanical issues, an enemy attack, and even the infamous Bermuda Triangle have been put forth to explain the disappearance. This is the story of the mysterious loss of the USS Scorpion. During the beginning of the 14th century, Italian inventor Leonardo da Vinci conceived of a crude concept of a submerged vehicle. In 1620, English inventor Cornelius Drebbel designed a submarine that successfully traversed the River Thames in 3 hours. By the 18th century, military engineers began to see the nascent arrival of the submarine as a tool for war. During the American War for Independence in 1776, American inventor David Bunchell developed the first submarine vehicle named the USS Turtle, or simply the Turtle, an acorn-looking device that attempted to attach an explosive device to a British warship, but failed to sink it. Early submarines were still crude wooden contraptions with oil-soaked tarps that made their skin waterproof. This all would change in the mid-19th century with the widespread use of steel for ship hulls. One of the earliest submarines was the Confederate Navy's H.L. Hunley, one of the world's first true naval submarines. The sub was used during the American Civil War and sunk the Union or American Navy ship USS Housatonic, although the Hunley itself was lost during the mission. During the First World War, the Imperial German Navy began to develop and use the infamous Unterseeboot, or U-boat, to attack Allied merchant shipping and even civilian ships suspected of smuggling arms to the combat zone in Europe. This included the sinking of the British liner RMS Lusitania on May 7, 1915, with the loss of 1,197 lives, including 120 Americans. Unterseeboot is the German term for underwater boat. During the Second World War, all the warring nations developed large and lethal submarine fleets to attack merchant and naval ships of the opposite sides. This included the Battle of the Atlantic, in which the German Navy, or the Kriegsmarine, sunk thousands of tons of Allied shipping. By the 1950s, and at the onset of the Cold War, submarines became bigger, more powerful, and more lethal. Crude, antiquated early mechanisms were soon replaced by more sophisticated systems. One of these was the advent of nuclear propulsion. This replaced the old diesel engines of the past. With these engines, early submarines had to surface to recharge their batteries and also for the crew to receive fresh air. This made submarines susceptible to enemy attack. With nuclear power, submarines could remain submerged for months at a time. In 1954, the USS Nautilus became the first ever nuclear submarine. Submarines were now bigger, more powerful, and could dive deeper than any previous boats before. However, despite the advancements in technology, the submarine, like any vessel, can be subject to the unforgiving conditions of the open ocean. Submarine crews are often confined to claustrophobic quarters for long periods of time, unable to see the sun or the sky for months, and traversing vast parts of an unknown realm miles deep. Even more deadlier than a potential enemy is the crushing depths that could crush a submarine's hull in seconds. This unfortunately happened to the USS Thresher on April 10, 1963, with the loss of all 129 crew members on board. It is still the deadliest submarine disaster ever. It is believed that a faulty valve leaked water into the sub, causing the sub to sink below its crush step, and the sub imploded. The USS Scorpion was built in 1958 and launched in 1960 from the General Dynamics Electric Boat Division out of Groton, Connecticut. The ship did routine patrols shadowing the Soviet naval forces in the Atlantic Ocean. However, in 1967, reports of Soviet naval activity were reported in the Mediterranean Sea. In the past, the Soviet Navy operated mostly in the northernmost Atlantic Ocean. Operations in the Mediterranean Sea and close to countries like Italy and Turkey caused great concern for the U.S. Navy. In May of 1968, the Scorpion was tasked to shadow Soviet Navy in and around the Mediterranean Sea. Following its mission, the submarine prepared to return home to its home base in Norfolk, Virginia, but not before stopping off at a joint U.S.-Spanish naval base named Rota to drop off 2 crew members. Following this, the Scorpion began its long trip home. On this mission, the Scorpion was commanded by 36-year-old Francis A. Slattery, with 98 other men under his command. The Scorpion was supposed to have returned back to the United States on May 27th. Families of the crew members waited for the return of their loved ones, but the Scorpion was nowhere to be found. While secrecy pervaded the lives of submariners and their families, the Scorpion was still missing, and the U.S. Navy did not share details of the situation with the families. No mayday was ever received, and after several days, the Navy dispatched a flotilla of dozens of aircraft and surface ships to hunt for the missing submarine. Ocean scientist John P. Craven examined a series of mysterious explosions recorded by undersea microphones. Craven and the Navy were able to use the acoustic data to pinpoint a rough search area somewhere southwest of the Azores, a Portuguese island chain. The exact location of the Scorpion remained a mystery until October of 1968, when the naval research ship Mizar located a large mysterious object some 10,000 feet down and 400 miles southwest of the Azores at the easternmost end of the Sargasso Sea. Further analysis and photos of the site confirmed that the objects on the sea floor was indeed the USS Scorpion. The sub was in several pieces, and all 99 men on board were lost. Much of the sub had been obliterated when the Scorpion imploded under the intense pressure of the water. The increased pressure superheated the air and incinerated the entire inside of the sub. All the crew died probably in mere seconds and had no time to process what was going on. For the second time in less than a decade, the United States had lost another submarine. The Navy established an inquiry on the loss of the Scorpion. They were perplexed that the U.S. had lost another sub despite the stringent safety protocols put in place following the USS Thresher disaster. Soon, several theories were put forth to explain the catastrophe. One theory was that a hydrogen buildup from a charging battery caused the explosion. The buildup then caused an explosion that sunk the sub. This has become the most accepted theory for the loss of the Scorpion. Another theory is that a torpedo exploded, or that the Scorpion launched a faulty torpedo only for the torpedo to target the sub. One of the most sinister theories involved the Scorpion being destroyed by the Soviet Navy, either by malice or by incident. In one account, the Scorpion may have been sunk due to it harassing Soviet naval forces, or that the sub collided with a Soviet ship. During the Cold War, submarines from opposing sides oftentimes passed mere feet within each other, often causing collisions that damaged the hulls of submarines. One of the most unlikely theories is that the Scorpion had been yet another victim of the infamous Bermuda Triangle, the area of the Atlantic rumored to have multiple mysterious disappearances of ships and airplanes. In this theory, even the seemingly impervious USS Scorpion was a victim of the paranormal forces of the Triangle, and that the submarine was the Triangle's latest victim. It could also be possible that some unknown mechanical issue caused the loss of the sub. Both it and the USS Thresher were pressed into service at a hurried pace to keep up with the ever-growing Soviet naval threat. Perhaps an unforeseen fault occurred that was missed in inspection that overwhelmed the crew and destroyed the sub. It should be noted that the Scorpion contained 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes. The U.S. Navy was unable to offer an explanation for the sub's loss, nor the death of 99 crew members. The year 1968 was a particularly deadly year for submarines and their crews. In addition to the Scorpion, 3 other submarines mysteriously disappeared. In March, the Soviet sub K-129 was lost off the coast of Hawaii, with the loss of 98 lives. The Israeli sub Dakar mysteriously disappeared in the Mediterranean Sea in January with the deaths of 61 people. And the French naval sub Minerve sunk in foul weather off the coast of France on January 27th with the loss of 52 men. In each case, no cause could be found to explain any of the losses. The loss of the Scorpion and these other subs is yet a chilling reminder of the dangerous realm of the deep sea.